I think in theory, the idea of a cop is really good. Somebody's sworn to uphold his duties and keep us safe from extraordinary dangers. But innately, police can be threatening, intimidating, and hostile, especially for non-violent situations. I'm an advocate of having responders that are more suited for specific situations, because when you go into these non-violent situations and you potentially create a violent situation, or you create hostility where there doesn't need to be any, you're not necessarily rectifying the problem. When you have these mental health crises, or you're dealing with people with disabilities, drug addicts, alcoholics that are having a non-violent encounter, you're just increasing the chances of making it become violent.
I would like it where I could allow my kids to wander around the streets whenever, but I also, I genuinely don't know what it looks like, only because I can't conceptualize something that's never been given an option.
Reimagining public safety looks like a community where I actually feel safe when I'm engaging with law enforcement. Even for myself, like a cis white woman with privilege, when I see law enforcement, I feel afraid. And that fear quadruples when it comes to law enforcement interaction with my kids of color, and my kids who struggle with mental illness. The system we have in place right now it's terrifying. I mean, it's a huge stressor in my everyday life, is how to keep my kids safe from our local law enforcement.
Reimagining public safety to me means that when you call 911, the right person shows up to de-escalate the situation. Someone who's going to show up with a gun and appear threatening, and in situations of mental health or of drug abuse, it's just not a place where force is helpful or is going to lead to anything that's good for either party. And it'll create an opportunity for especially marginalized Black and people of color. Marginalized populations are way more likely to get trapped in the system and have trouble paying for court, and it just sets them up for failure when it's time to get a job. And these systems, they just don't benefit citizens. And I do believe that if the person who shows up at 911, if they are trained to show compassion, if they're trained to de-escalate a person who is out of control, I just think the outcome is going to be a lot better for everybody. I don't think it's rocket science.
Police going through more de-escalation training to better understand or de-escalate the situation at hand, because there's been a lot of instances in the town where the police are acting over aggressively or using that title as power.
Reimagining public safety to me is reducing the responsibility that the police have incurred. They're responsible not only for law enforcement, but at times military work. They're paramedics and they're crisis counselors, and they go out on the street after 6 months of training and are expected to be experts at this when it is so much more difficult than that.
Maybe a reallocation of funds from the traditional police, system that we have now towards maybe other systems that might be more towards preventing crime, because I feel like the system that we have now is more for punishment of crimes that have already happened versus actually preventing crime from happening. So maybe reallocating money towards after-school programs, towards education, towards affordable housing, things like that I think would benefit people more in the long term, so that people are less likely to go into a lifestyle of crime.
I think reimagining public safety is taking public safety out of the hands of people with badges and putting it back into the hands of normal people in society.
The system as it is now isn't so much about protecting the community as it is about controlling the community. When I was a teenager, there was a dude who was threatening to sexually assault me and kill me. And I went to the police station. I was on my lunch at school, And they were like, well, this is the first offense, so we can't help you with that. At least from like my personal experience, I've had instances where like I've been assaulted and they're like, oh, well, we can't really do anything about that right now because X, Y, and Z didn't happen, so we can't really help you with this.
Obviously they're carrying weapons and they're just people too. I mean, sure, police do help, but what kind of help do they offer?
But right now, the way policing happens is it's just you have officers with guns and badges just walking around expecting there to be crime, or like they have this mentality of they're there to respond to crime rather than prevent it from happening in the first place. You know, the most important thing to do is to realize why this crime happens, and when it is happening, not to demonize the people who perpetuate it, but understand why and figure out how to help them forward.
Just like checks and balances, you know, like somebody's got, you know, the police check people that are misbehaving, somebody gotta check the police. So.
You don't have to, oh, just because I am an officer and I have certain rights and I have certain things over a normal citizen, that I can just, oh, no. Why are you doing that? That shouldn't be your first instinct. Don't sit there and try to argue with that person or try to prove your point like you're bigger than that person. Guess what? They're a human being too. You're a human being.
Policing should be protecting people, you know, not trying to go out like, oh, who's injecting heroin out here? Better arrest them. You know, who's dealing weed out here? Like, you know, sure, like whatever, like get like horrible drugs that are killing people off the streets. I get that, but police, the amount of leeway a police officer has in terms of like determining what is a crime and what is not is very fucked up. And
I think that the real like nuts and bolts of public safety look like people taking care of one another and being inspired to take care of one another by the people who are technically in charge of our safety.
I think it's like the problem that there's like a lot of like white cops in the systems, like in like the police systems, to be honest. And like there's not a lot of like black people there. Like you might see some, but not all of them. Yeah. So yeah, I might change like that, make it more that there's like more black cops instead of white cops.
Being able to call the police when an actual altercation has occurred and not feeling like I'm being threatened with a double-edged sword. At the end of the day, as a young black male, I was always taught that police are not there to help you. They're there to convict somebody, and that has always been proven facts. Nothing really much more.
So my job, I work with kids of all races, and the minority kids, when I talk to them about it, they you know, they don't like the police. Their first reaction is, you know, every police officer is racist, and white or black, so it's not really a race thing. Police is just police as a whole. And for me growing up, it was never that way, but seeing these kids go through it, I can understand where they're coming from and why they see it that way. And that's something that needs to change, because, you know, a lot of kids are getting left behind because of that, and they're being judged because of how they feel about enforcement in Ithaca. And so that's why I feel like people who are involved in the community and have been involved in the community would be big for kids to see that and look up to.
More community help within the community. It looks like, how can we help each other as neighbors instead of having to call, you know, such an egregious thing like IPD for the very simplest things.
Well, last time I was in West Village, I saw this woman call the police because there was like people being loud in front of her house, and the cops got there and basically ended up arresting the woman who called them to de-escalate a situation.
And I've seen situations where I live where someone has called because someone was playing music really loudly, and it was after curfew. They were trying to go to sleep. And I guess because of where I live, they decided to send 8 officers for one noise complaint. I just think that's kind of fucked up that like when bad things are actually happening, the police are like, we can't do anything. It's not within our like jurisdiction or whatever the fuck. They're like, we can't do anything to help you. But when it's something so small as like someone calling for a noise complaint, they decide to send so many people for something so small, and then, you know, try and arrest the person who made the complaint in the first place.
What you'll see is people who continually, or who commit a crime, people who commit a crime, they'll go to prison, and then that prison won't rehabilitate them. They'll come out and then do some minor petty theft or something like that, and then go back into the prison, and it becomes this this cycle of almost abuse where people are going in and out and in and out, and to the point where they'll just stay there because that's the only place they feel at home. So what we really need to do is understand and talk to the people in the community who are at risk of committing crime or that need help, and really understand how we can help them and what we can give them to support them, instead of walking around with guns. You know, that doesn't solve anything. It just creates more violence and trauma.
Like, I'm not a police officer, so I don't know like how like the training and everything is like that. Maybe there has to be like more investigation. Like, I feel like there's a lot of people feel a lot of intimidation more than anything, which also like creates chaos and people acting out.
I made a joke the other day saying like, if you got like some you know, like older women just like to team up and get like radios or like be on social media and just like show up to like problem situations, that like people would definitely get shut down probably quicker than the police, because you know they're not having that.
More of a focus on a community level of the community taking part with the people who are there to help keep us safe. So it's like the community working with other people from the community to help keep us all safe.
It takes it's a full community effort from everyone, including everyday citizens too. Stop. You see someone needs help on the side of the road, stop and help them. You know, it's not that hard.